If you already receive special monthly compensation from the VA, here's something most veterans never check. The VA is supposed to look at every separate qualifying disability you have and determine whether you're entitled to intermediate step increases, half steps like L and a half, M and a half, N and a half. But a lot of veterans get stuck at one SMC level when they actually qualify for higher. Not because they don't have the disabilities, but because VA didn't do the full analysis. In May 2024, the Federal Circuit issued a decision called Berry v. McDonough that forced VA to change how they calculate these intermediate steps. And it opened the door for thousands of veterans to get the SMC rate they should have been receiving all along. But Berry did not create a shortcut, and it does not mean every veteran with multiple high ratings automatically qualifies. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through SMC intermediate steps by the numbers, step by step, so you can review your own rating decision and see whether VA may have missed something. Here's what we're covering today. First, what SMC actually is and how it's different from regular VA disability compensation. Second, what intermediate steps are and why they exist. Third, the two main rules that allow veterans to qualify for intermediate increases, the 50% rule and the 100% rule. Fourth, what Berry v. McDonough actually held and why it matters. And fifth, how you can review your own rating decision and code sheet to see whether VA properly considered all your separate disabilities when they calculated your SMC level. This is one of the most technical areas of VA disability law, but it's also one of the most valuable. Because if VA missed a step, the difference can be hundreds of dollars per month and potentially tens of thousands in retroactive benefits. My goal is never to mislead, only to empower you with accurate, honest, and actionable information. So let's slow this down and walk through it piece by piece. Let's start with the basics. SMC stands for Special Monthly Compensation. It's a separate payment structure that sits on top of regular VA disability compensation. Regular VA ratings are based on percentages, 10%, 30%, 70%, 100%, and those percentages get combined using VA math to give you a combined rating. SMC is different. SMC is not about percentages, it's about specific legal thresholds. You qualify for SMC when you have certain severe disabilities or combinations of disabilities that meet the criteria laid out in Title 38 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 350. For example, you might qualify for SMC if you've lost the use of both feet, or if you're blind in both eyes at a qualifying level, or if you've lost the use of one hand and one foot. Or in some cases, if you have one disability rated at 100%, an additional separate disability or disabilities independently ratable at 60% or more. Different SMC levels have different legal requirements. SMC levels are labeled with letters, SMCK, SMCL, SMCM, SMCN, and so on, all the way up to SMCO and beyond. Each level has a specific monthly payment amount that's higher than the level below it. And here's the key point. SMC is not automatic. VA has to determine that you meet the specific criteria for each level. And if you have additional separate disabilities beyond what got you to your current SMC level, VA is supposed to analyze whether those additional disabilities qualify you for an intermediate step increase. That's where most veterans get tripped up. So what is an intermediate step? An intermediate step, also called a half step, is an SMC rate that falls between two statutory SMC levels. For example, if you qualify for SMCL because of qualifying conditions like loss of use of both feet or the need for regular aid and attendance, but you also have additional separate disabilities that meet certain criteria, you might qualify for SMCL and a half. That's the intermediate step between SMCL and SMCM. Same thing for M and a half, N and a half, and so on. These intermediate steps exist because Congress and VA recognize that some veterans have disabilities that are more severe than one SMC level, but not quite severe enough to reach the next full statutory level. So the regulations created these half steps to bridge the gap. The monthly payment for an intermediate step is higher than the base level, but lower than the next full level. Now here's what matters. A lot of veterans receive SMC at a base level, let's say SMCL, and they assume that's it. They assume VA looked at everything and determined that L is the correct level. But what VA is supposed to do is this. They're supposed to look at what disabilities were used to establish your SMCL entitlement. And then they're supposed to look at your other service-connected disabilities and determine whether any of those separate disabilities qualify you for an intermediate increase. And that's where the two main rules come in. The first rule is found in 38 C.F.R. Section 3350F3. Here's what it says in plain English. If you already receive SMC at a certain level and you have additional separate disability or combinations of separate disabilities that are independently rateable at 50% or more, you may qualify for the next intermediate step. Let me break that down. Additional separate disabilities means disabilities that are distinct from the disability or disabilities that were used to establish your current SMC level. Independently rateable at 50% or more means the additional disability or combination of additional disabilities must combine to at least 50% under VA math. In some situations, multiple separate disabilities can be combined to reach that 50% threshold, so long as they are separate and distinct from the disabilities used to establish the original SMC level. And separate means the disabilities have to involve different anatomical segments or different body systems. They can't be part of the same condition or the same functional loss. Here's an example. Let's say you qualify for SMCL because you've lost the use of both feet. That's your SMC qualifying disability. But you also have PTSD rated at 70%, and you have a back condition rated at 60%. Those are separate disabilities. They're not part of the foot condition, and they're independently rateable at 50% or more. Under the 50% rule, VA is supposed to consider whether those additional disabilities qualify you for an intermediate step increase, in this case, L and a half. Now, here's where it gets important. The regulation does not say you can only get one intermediate increase. It says you may qualify for an intermediate increase if you have additional separate disabilities that meet the criteria. And if you have multiple additional qualifying disabilities or combinations of disabilities that each satisfy the regulation, VA is supposed to analyze whether you qualify for multiple intermediate steps subject to the cap at SMCO. That's what Berry v. McDonough clarified. The second rule is found in 38 C.F.R. section 350F4. This one is more specific. If you already receive SMC at a certain level and you have a separate single permanent disability that is independently rateable at 100%, you may qualify for the next higher statutory or intermediate rate. Let me break that down too. Separate, single, permanent disability means one disability that is distinct from the disabilities used to establish your current SMC level, and it has to be permanent, not temporary. Independently rateable at 100% means the disability is rated at 100% on its own. And here's the key. It cannot be based on individual unemployability. It has to be a schedular 100% rating. So if you have PTSD rated at 100% under the rating schedule, that counts. But if you have a 70% PTSD rating and you're receiving 100% compensation because of TDIU, that does not count for this specific rule. Here's an example. Let's say you qualify for SMCL because you've lost the use of both feet. That's your SMC qualifying condition. But you also have a separate 100% schedular rating for PTSD. Under the 100% rule, VA is supposed to consider whether that separate 100% disability qualifies you for the next higher SMC rate, in this case, SMCM. Now, here's what veterans need to understand. These rules are not automatic. VA has to apply them. And a lot of times, VA doesn't, either because the rater didn't see the additional disabilities, or because they didn't understand the regulations, or because they stopped the analysis too early. That's what Berry v. McDonough addressed. So what did Berry v. McDonough actually hold? In May 2024, the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision in a case called Berry v. McDonough. The veteran in that case, Mr. Berry, was receiving SMC at a certain level. He had multiple additional service-connected disabilities that were independently rateable at 50% or more. VA granted him one intermediate step increase, but they stopped there. Mr. Berry argued that under the regulation, he was entitled to additional intermediate step increases because he had multiple qualifying disabilities. VA said no. VA's position was that the regulation only allowed one intermediate increase under the 50% rule. The Federal Circuit disagreed. The court held that the regulation does not limit a veteran to only one intermediate rate SMC increase under Section 353. If a veteran has multiple additional separate disabilities or qualifying combinations of disabilities that meet the regulatory threshold, VA must analyze whether the veteran qualifies for multiple intermediate steps subject to the cap at SMCO. That was a big deal because it meant VA had to go back and reanalyze thousands of SMC cases where they may have stopped at one intermediate increase when the veteran actually qualified for more. But here's what Berry did not do. Barry did not create a free pass. It did not say every veteran with multiple high ratings automatically qualifies for higher SMC, and it did not eliminate the requirement that the additional disabilities have to be separate and distinct from the disabilities used to establish the original SMC level. What Barry did was force VA to do the full analysis. So, how do you know if this applies to you? Here's what you need to do. First, pull your most recent rating decision. You need the full decision, not just the summary page. Second, pull your code sheet. Now, a lot of veterans don't even know what a code sheet is. It's the document that lists all your service-connected disabilities with their diagnostic codes and individual ratings. It's usually part of your C file. If you don't have it, here's how to get it. Log into va.gov and request your records or C file, or call 1-800-827-1000 and ask how to obtain your rating code sheet and prior rating decisions. You can also work through your VSO or representative. You need this document because without it, you're guessing. Third, look at the section of your rating decision that explains your SMC award. It should tell you what disabilities VA used to establish your current SMC level. Fourth, make a list of all your other service-connected disabilities. Group them by body system or anatomical segment. Fifth, identify which of those additional disabilities or combinations of disabilities may independently combine to 50% or higher, or whether any of them are rated at 100% schedular. Sixth, ask yourself this question: are these additional disabilities separate and distinct from the disabilities VA used to grant my current SMC level? If the answer is yes, then you may have a basis to request a review of your SMC entitlement. But here's where veterans get tripped up. Just because you have multiple high ratings does not mean they're all separate for SMC purposes. For example, if you have PTSD rated at 70% and depression rated at 50%, VA generally rates those together under the mental health criteria. They are usually not treated as separate disabilities for SMC purposes. Or if you have a back condition rated at 60% and a hip condition rated at 50%, VA may need to analyze whether those conditions are truly separate and distinct for SMC purposes, or whether they stem from the same anatomical loss or functional impairment. This is one reason SMC analysis becomes very fact-specific. And watch out for pyramiding. Pyramiding is when VA has already bundled multiple symptoms or manifestations under one rating. If VA has already used certain symptoms or functional impairments to support one rating or one SMC entitlement, those same manifestations generally cannot be counted again to justify an additional SMC increase. The key question is this: did VA already account for this condition when they established your current SMC level or when they rated another condition? If yes, it may not qualify as separate for SMC purposes. And this is where the analysis gets technical. This is where a lot of veterans need help from an accredited representative, a claims agent, or an attorney who understands SMC. Because if VA missed a step, the difference can be hundreds of dollars per month and potentially tens of thousands in retroactive benefits. But if you file a claim without understanding the rules, you could waste time and create confusion in your file. Let's recap. SMC is not regular VA math. It's a separate legal structure based on specific thresholds. Intermediate steps, half steps, exist to bridge the gap between statutory SMC levels. If you already receive SMC and you have additional separate disabilities or combinations of disabilities independently rateable at 50% or more, you may qualify for an intermediate increase under Section 350F. 3, if you have a separate, single, permanent disability rated at 100% schedular, you may qualify for the next higher rate under Section 350F. 4. Barry v. McDonough held that VA cannot automatically stop at one intermediate increase if you have multiple qualifying disabilities. But Barry did not create a shortcut. It forced VA to do the full analysis. So here's your challenge. Before you assume the VA got it right, review your rating decision, your code sheet, and the basis for your current SMC award. Look at what disabilities VA used to establish your SMC level. Then look at your other service-connected disabilities by body system and rating. If you see separate disabilities that may meet the 50% or 100% rules, do not guess. Talk with an accredited representative, claims agent, or attorney who understands SMC. This is not an area where you want to file a claim based on a YouTube video. This is an area where you want expert guidance. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the channel. We break down complicated VA topics in plain English so you can make informed decisions about your benefits. And if you want more resources, plain English tools, guides, and step-by-step breakdowns, visit veteranclaimsmadeeasy.com/resources. My goal is never to mislead, only to empower you with accurate, honest, and actionable information. Thanks for watching, and remember, clarity before you file.